So, hello then, welcome back to yet another Night in the Movies podcast. I'm Inspirational Night, and in these podcasts I like talking all things movies and TV, and whatever I want, whenever I want. And in today's podcast, I am finishing off my Middle-earth film reviews, at least for now, with my review of The Hobbit, the Battle of the Five Armies. But, just before I do that, I should say what I say at the start of every podcast I do, which is, if you are watching this podcast on YouTube, hello to my viewers, but prefer to listen to your podcast on Spotify, well, you're in luck, as you can also listen to this podcast on Spotify at The Night of the Movies on that platform. And if you are already listening to this podcast on Spotify, hello there to podcast listeners, then you can also check this podcast out visually. Yes, you can watch this podcast on my YouTube channel at Night of the Movies on that platform as well. Likewise, whatever you may be watching or listening to this podcast, don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy the podcast, of course, and please leave me with some feedback on things to improve on in future podcasts, because there are always things to improve on, and feedback is, as ever, much appreciated. So, let's get into it, shall we? My final Middle-earth film review with my view of The Hobbit, the Battle of the Five Armies, the final film in Peter Jackson's Middle-earth saga. Well, the final film that was released in Peter Jackson's Middle-earth saga, because if you watch the Middle-earth saga in chronological order, the film you'll end with is The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, which I just put a poster up back there, somewhere over there at the back of my room. But if you watch the films in release order, like I've reviewed the movies, then this is the one you'll end with. This is the one you'll end with. You'll end with The Hobbit, the Battle of the Five Armies. And you know what? I think it's a fitting conclusion. And I don't care what anybody says. I love this movie. I think it's wildly entertaining, and I love seeing the direction of the film, you know, where certain storylines go. I think Peter Jackson does such a good job directing this movie. The Howard Shore musical score, so many sequences are breathtaking in this film, right from the opening. I really love seeing more of this world. I think the battle sequences are incredibly well done. Yes, there's a bit too much CGI on a rewatch, but I still don't really care about that, because Peter Jackson with this film, he doesn't just make a film, he makes a movie. You know, that's something Peter Jackson always does, and that's something I really admire him for, whether it's with the Middle-earth saga or his King Kong movie, or, you know, the way he directed The Beatles Get Back. I mean, I know he wasn't actually sitting behind a camera directing The Beatles Get Back like he was with the Lord of the Rings films, the Hobbit movies, and King Kong, his version of King Kong, but he still added so much footage into that docuseries because he knew it's what people wanted to see. And what I really love about the Battle of the Five Armies, to link it to The Beatles Get Back, is that people wanted to see battles in this film. People wanted to see the duels. You know, it's in the title of this film, and that's what he delivers on. And also, I love this film because, and this may sound like a petty reason, but actually it's quite a big reason. I love this film because it makes me feel like a kid again. You know, when I was growing up, I used to have these knight figures. In fact, I still have them upstairs somewhere. Now that I think about it, I used to have these knight figures, and me and my brothers used to play battles with these knight figures. And obviously now, at an older age, I don't do that as much, although I still collect a lot. If you don't believe me, look behind me. I still collect a lot, but we just don't do that anymore. And I remember growing up, and this film came out around the time that I stopped doing that. I stopped doing toy battles with my brothers and even my mom every now and then. It's around the time that I stopped doing that this film came out, and I wanted to see a film or television show do a big, epic, medieval fantasy battle and do it well. Do it in a way that I was invested in all the characters, invested in all the action sequences, invested in all the duels, invested in all the character moments in the battle. I wanted to see somebody do that well, and I hadn't seen that in TV, and I hadn't seen that in film. You know, I mean, I'd seen Two Towers and Return of the King before I'd seen this movie, yes, but I hadn't seen those films at the cinema, And those films also didn't have a lasting effect to me the same way that they do now. You know, I've already spoken about this when I was growing up. I didn't love the Lord of the Rings trilogy as I do now, and I actually preferred the Hobbit trilogy because, as I've already said, in my view of the first Hobbit film, in my view of the first Hobbit movie, An Unexpected Journey, in my view of the second Hobbit film, The Desolation of Smaug, those films are my introduction to cinema and, you know, introduced me to what the cinematic experience could be like. And the thing is, I wanted to see a big, epic, medieval fantasy battle at the cinema, something I can just get completely immersed into and, you know, take back to those times when I was a kid again, playing with those knight figures and, you know, doing battles with these figures which were nearly as entertaining as, you know, you think they would be, but were still so much fun. And I wanted to see someone capture my imagination in a film or television show. It didn't happen in a television show really until when I was watching Game of Thrones, which was a couple of years after. But it did happen with this movie for me. It happened when I remember being so excited to see this film because of the prospect of this happening for me with this movie. And I was sitting in the cinema watching all the battles take place and being absolutely absorbed by it all, completely immersed in it, and I was grinning from ear to ear throughout the second half of this film. I mean, I love the first half as well, particularly that opening sequence with Smaug when he destroyed Lake Town. I love all that. But the second half of this film, I was like, this is what I've always dreamed of watching in the cinema. Seeing all these races of characters. We have a Hobbit, we have Gandalf there, a wizard, but then we also have dwarfs, orcs, elves, another lot of orcs, and there's goblin mercenaries, and there's people of Lake Town all thrown into this big epic battle, and there's giants and there's trolls there too. It's like, wow, I've never seen anything like this in the cinema, and I just absolutely loved it. You know, I've got Tom Baker as the Fourth Doctor on my calendar back there, and there's this quote on that calendar that says this: there's no point in being grown up if you can't be childish sometimes. And I remember watching this film, and it came at a time when I was being told to be more grown up, and then I watched this film and I felt like a kid again in the way that films should make you feel every now and then. I hate when people say, you know, this film, you know, it makes you feel like a kid again, therefore it's bad. No. If a film makes you feel like a kid again, then that can often be a good thing. It's a sense of escapism. And that's exactly what this film does for me. It makes me feel like a kid again every time I watch it. You know, and I'm so invested in the battle and I'm invested in everything that's going on. I think it's a great conclusion to the Hobbit trilogy. Now, I do think it's the worst of the Hobbit movies, and it is my least favourite of Peter Jackson's Middle-earth films overall, but I still really, really love it because of how invested I was in this trilogy. I can completely understand somebody not liking the first two Hobbit movies, watching this one and absolutely hating it, or liking the first film but not necessarily liking the second film, and then really being disappointed by this one, because the second film in particular is a lot of setup. I mean, it's not just setup, especially if you watch the extended version of the second film, which I think the second half of the extended version is much better than the first half of the extended version of Desolation of Smaug, but still, if you watch the extended version of Desolation of Smaug, that film has a lot of payoff. But it also has a lot of setup. And for me, the setup all worked though, and I love the way all the payoff was done. I really love so many aspects of this film, whether, as what he mentioned, the opening with Smaug gone down here. You know, you got Smaug destroying Lake Town, and I love all that because I remember counting down the days to this movie after the cliffhanger that Desolation of Smaug ended on. You know, when you see Smaug flying, I'm trying to play Smaug there, I don't know why, I'm trying to do the movements of Smaug. We see him flying to Lake Town and Bilbo's final line, what have we done? I remember counting down the days till this film came out, much like I did with the second Hobbit movie because the first one meant so much to me. And I remember counting down the days. I was like, I want to see the conclusion to this trilogy. I want to see what happens to the people of Lake Town. Do they all die? Does somehow Smaug get defeated? Is Smaug involved in the battle of the Five Armies? I don't know, because as I've already mentioned in my reviews of the first two Hobbit movies, I haven't read the book that this film is based on, so I didn't know anything about what was going to happen to Smaug, what the Battle of the Five Armies entailed when the film was titled that. And I remember for the longest time in 2014, when this film came out, it came out Christmas 2014, for the longest time in 2014, a trailer hadn't been released for the film, and every single day I'd come back from school and I'd check YouTube to see if a trailer had been released. And one day, I think it was it must have been in September. Anyway, yeah, in September I came back from school one day and I went on my phone and a trailer had been released for the third Hobbit film, and I couldn't believe my eyes. I genuinely couldn't. And I was watching this trailer, and you had Pippin's song from Return of the King, Oh, miss behind all the world from here. The song that plays when you see Faramir going to fight the orcs, and he's going to die, and it's a very emotional scene in Return of the King. When you have that song playing in the background of the teaser trailer of this film, I was like, oh god, this is going to be brilliant. And seeing that trailer, I kept rewatching it that whole evening. I could not wait to see this film. And then when I went to go and see it at the cinema, surprise, surprise, I fell in love with it. I didn't love it as much as I loved the first two Hobbit movies at the cinema, but I still loved this one. And that opening sequence with Smaug was everything I wanted it to be. Everything I wanted it to be. It's breathtaking. Watching it now, I still think it's I still think it's some of Peter Jackson's finest work. I truly think that the way he directs that opening sequence, I know it's got a lot of CGI, but in the end, it's a talking dragon, and that voiced by Benedict Cumberbatch, actually played by Benedict Cumberbatch. If you watch behind the scenes features on this film, he actually plays a character much like, Andy Serkis plays Gollum in the Lord of the Rings trilogy and in the first Hobbit movie. You see, it's a dragon burning down a town on a lake. Of course there's going to be a lot of CGI, but the CGI didn't bother me because I was so taken by that opening scene and the way that Howard Shore score starts off the film, da 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 bom 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 bom. I'm butchering up my rendition of it badly, but the way the musical score opens this film engaged me just like that, and the whole opening sequence, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I still haven't quite got over the opening sequence to the Battle of the Five Armies. I still haven't got over seeing it in a cinema. I was like, oh my god, if the film opens I remember thinking, oh my god, if the film opens like this, God knows where it's going to go next. And if I'm being frank, which I am, because, otherwise, what's the point of me doing these reviews on YouTube? If I'm being frank, I don't think the rest of the film lives up to that opening sequence. But I do think it's very good. I love all the battle sequences. I love the way Peter Jackson directs them. I love how there's all these emotional moments in the battle sequences too. You see the horror of what the orcs are doing at the Battle of Erebor. That's what I always call it. I don't know if it is actually called that, but that's what I'm going to call it for the sake of this podcast today. At the Battle of Erebor, I love how you see that all these people, the troubles that all these people are facing in these battles, and you get to see all these different character moments where, Thorin and Bilbo reunite in battle, and they've fallen out before, but then they reunite in battle and things are mended. And in the extended edition, there's so many great moments added on in the battle sequences. The extended edition to this movie is the definitive edition. I don't care what anybody else says. People might say, oh, how the hell did Peter Jackson, extend one quite small book in the Hobbit book into three-hour films? Personally, I don't care about all that. I think he did it remarkably well. That being said, I don't love the extended editions to the first two Hobbit movies, but I think the extended edition to the third Hobbit movie, is what I meant to say there, is fine flipping tastic, because it makes this more of a complete movie. Even so, I loved this film, seeing it the first time in the cinema. Even so, I loved it after my first viewing. I did walk out of the cinema thinking, there were some plot holes there. Like, where did they get the goats from in the battle? At one point in the theatrical version of this film, they just start riding goats in the battle, and it's not explained where they come from. Also, I'm surprised there wasn't more of a send-off for Thorin. And I was thinking on the way back from watching the cinema, thinking, wow, what a cinematic experience. And I loved it, but I wish it felt more complete. The extended edition makes this film feel more complete and concludes the Hobbit trilogy overall perfectly. If you're a fan of the Hobbit movies and you have not seen the extended edition to this film, get yourself a present and buy this online, because it's brilliant. There's so many aspects of the extended edition which I really wish they put in the theatrical cut. For example, Thorin's funeral. I mean, don't get me wrong, in the theatrical cut you have this very emotional scene between Bilbo and Thorin where Thorin is dying and Bilbo's crying over him. It's one of the best moments in this trilogy overall. But in the extended edition, there's this whole bit with Thorin's funeral where you see that the dwarf played by Billy Connolly, I forgot what the dwarf is called now, but that dwarf who shows up at the battle with the Dwarf Armies. If you've seen the film, you probably know what dwarf I'm talking about. Probably a picture of him right there, even. But the dwarf that shows up at the battle, he becomes the king, and you see that, and you see how the passing of Thorin has affected all the people that were in his company, all the dwarves and Gandalf, and even Radagast that were in his company. All the people that had met Thorin, shall I say, all the people that had met Thorin, how it's affected him, how the passing of Thorin has affected these characters. And the sequence is only, it's not even a sequence, the scene is only 2 minutes long, and it's not in the theatrical cut. It's probably on YouTube, and I'd definitely recommend watching it, because it makes the film feel more complete, and it gives Thorin a proper send-off. I still today don't quite understand why Peter Jackson didn't have that in the original cut, because it's not a long scene. It's not like the scene goes on for 15 minutes and you can understand why they cut it out. It literally goes on for 2 to 3 minutes, and it's just more of a better goodbye to Thorin. And from what I've heard, that is in the books as well. So I find it even weirder, even stranger, that he didn't include it in the theatrical cut. Also, in the extended edition of this film, there are so many moments with the goats in the battle which make more sense, because as I've already said, in the theatrical cut of this film, halfway through the battle you just see Thorin, Dwalin, Balin, and there might be some Achille and Philly as well. They just start riding goats halfway through the battle. Like, where the hell did they get the goats from? The extended version explains it incredibly well in so many wildly entertaining sequences. For example, when you see the dwarf armies start to charge on the elves in the battle, they all charge on goats, and you're like, why is this not included in the original cut? Because it's great. Who doesn't want to see dwarf armies riding on goats? It's brilliant. And it's not in the theatrical cut, and it's in the extended edition, and it's wildly entertaining. Yes, it's all CGI, but who cares? These are medieval fantasy films. If you're looking for realism, go and look elsewhere. And later on in the Battle of the Five Armies in this film, there's this chariot sequence where Balin has got this chariot of goats, and it's being chased along the battle. I'm explaining it awfully, but watch the scene online. It is on YouTube. And I did hear somewhere, I don't know how true it is, because I only read it on Google. I didn't read it, of an interview from Peter Jackson or anything, or anybody involved in the film. But apparently this scene wasn't included because they didn't finish it in time. They didn't finish the CGI in time. And that's more understandable why they didn't include it in the theatrical cut. Also, it's a bit of a gory scene. You do see some trolls' heads get cut off by this chariot. If you've seen the sequence, you'll probably know what I'm talking about. But this chariot sequence in the extended edition is so entertaining. It's great. And it explains where Thorin, Dwalin, Killy and Philly all get the goats from, that they ride up to the hill where Azog, the main orc antagonist, is. It explains where all that comes from. It explains where the goats come from, and it does it in such an entertaining way. You see this goat chariot face off against the Waugs in battle. It's a really entertaining sequence, and I'm so sad that it was cut out, because it's one of the best action sequences, and this is not a hyperbole here, I'm being genuinely serious. watch the sequence and argue with me after if you don't believe me after I say this. That chariot sequence involving the goat that is in the extended edition but not in the theatrical cut of this film, and the tractor's just trying to distract me from saying this. I almost forgot what I was about to say there. What was I about to say? That's it. The chariot sequence involving the goat in this film is one of the best action sequences in all 3 Hobbit movies. And it's not on the theatrical cut. It just annoys me that because it's so entertaining. And it explains where the goats come from. Because again, when you watch the theatrical cut, the goats come out of nowhere. Not in the extended edition. Plus, in the extended edition, there's this brilliant moment where the Elf Army and the Dwarf Armies start to fight with one another. And they start firing arrows at each other. But at the same time, though, the Dwarf Army fires their arrows in the air. And the Elf Army fires their arrows in the air. And then in the air, the Elf arrows somehow destroy the dwarf arrows. And again, it's only an extended cut. I'm explaining the scene horribly. Watch it on YouTube. After this podcast, of course. Watch it on YouTube if you don't believe me. But it makes the whole battle stuff so much more entertaining. Also, in the extended edition, you see the power of the dwarves when they come out into the battle. You see the power of them when they are all together. The power of Thorin's company alongside the power of the dwarf armies that show up at the Battle of Erebor. It's so much more entertaining. Furthermore, in the extended edition, you see Alfred die. Alfred, who was one of the most annoying characters in the Hobbit trilogy, and I'll talk about Alfred in more detail very shortly in this review. But Alfred is one of the most annoying characters in these films. You see him have this gruesome death in the extended edition, which I'm pretty sure wasn't in the theatrical cut. Do correct me if I'm wrong. I remember there was a bunch of sequences with Alfred in the theatrical cut, and by the way, if you don't know who Alfred is, he was Stephen Fry's character's assistant from Desolation of Smaug, and he's back in this film. Stephen Fry's character dies, but Alfred lives after Smaug destroyed Lake Town, and there's this great death sequence of him in this film, which is something I wanted to see when I was watching the theatrical cut, and it's only in the extended edition. It's like, why are you taking this out? People didn't like Alfred. People didn't like the character of Alfred in the Hobbit movies. And you took out the scene people would have probably liked to see the most in the theatrical cut, and you put it in the extended edition, and oh my god, it's so satisfying seeing Alfred die, because he's such an annoying character. Nothing against the actor who plays him. I'm sure he's a wonderful actor. I don't think I've seen him in anything else, but I'm sure he's a wonderful actor. But the character is it was a misstep. I love this from to pieces. I've already spoken about. I really, really love it. But that character is a misstep. And it feels like the people behind this movie, Peter Jackson and his crew, worked incredibly hard in this film. I'm not taking anything away from the work they put into this movie and all of the movies in this Middle-earth saga. But it feels like they were trying to do another Gollum with the Hobbit trilogy in the character of Alfred. The trouble is, he's not played by Andy Serkis. He looks a bit like Andy Serkis. I'll give Peter Jackson and his crew that. He looks a bit like Andy Serkis in all the Alfred makeup. But at the same time, though, he isn't Gollum. He isn't Andy Serkis' Gollum. And he's also not as well written as Gollum. And Gollum was in the books. And as far as I'm aware, and again, do correct me if I'm wrong, because I haven't read the Hobbit book, but Alfred isn't in the Hobbit book, or he isn't really in it that much, from what I've heard. So, what you have in this film, it's fine. I think it's a misstep. I don't think it's unwatchable, though. I just think it's a misstep having him in such a huge role. And I like the idea of him being a foil to Luke Evans as Bard, a man of Lake Town, this honourable man. You get this really sleazy, selfish person in Alfred. I liked the idea of him being a foil to Bard, but it doesn't really work. And there's so many moments in this film where you're thinking, why are you focusing on Alfred so much when there's all these characters in the battle, and you keep cutting back to Alfred, when instead you could cut back to Legolas doing all these cool elf moves, or any one of the dwarfs, or Bilbo, or Gandalf, or Gandalf, Legolas' father, or Tauriel. You could cut to any of these characters, and you keep going back to Alfred, who I can't stress enough is not really a likeable character, and it's not fun to watch. You know, I don't think he's a well-written character. And I do think that was a misstep from Peter Jackson and his crew on this film. I get what they were going for, and I like the idea behind it, but I don't think that character really works. I think it's an even bigger misstep that they didn't put his death in the theatrical cuts of this film, because it's such a satisfying death. And I was watching the extended edition, I was like, that was missing from the... I remember, you know, watching it for the first time and thinking, that was missing from the theatrical cut. Why wasn't it in the theatrical cut? And it's in the extended edition, so now I'm satisfied, because you see Alfred, I've seen Alfred meet his gruesome fate. You know, I love the extended edition to this film, and it's far superior than the theatrical edition. There's probably parts that I haven't talked about in the extended edition which make it even more of a complete film, but, you know, if you don't believe me, watch the extended edition to this film. Watch the theatrical cut to the first 2 Hobbit movies, then watch the extended edition to this one. You'll see what I mean. It concludes the trilogy in a far more complete way. And if you're a fan of the Hobbit movies and you haven't seen the extended edition to this film, what are you waiting for? That's it. I was trying to think. I forgot. You know, what else is included in the extended edition? It's mainly stuff in the battle, which are the good parts in the extended edition, which are the good additions to the film in the extended edition, if you follow my thinking. Yeah, in the battle, you get to see all the dwarves have their moments. You know, the dwarves that have been following for the previous 2 movies, who are part of Thorin's company. You see Biffa, who has the axe stuck in his head. You see the axe finally get taken out of his head, and Biffa has this great line, and he goes, I tell you where you could stick that. It's something like that. I think that's not quite the line he says, but it's something like that. I tell you where you can stick that. And it's the only line he has in all 3 films, because he's got an axe stuck in his head, so the whole point is the dwarf can't speak in all 3 of the Hobbit movies, and yet it's the only line he gets, and it's not in the theatrical cut. So I feel so sorry for the actor every time the scene comes up, because, like, most people don't even know you get a line in these films, you know, but he gets a line, and it's a great moment. And also, Biffa, who if I got the name of the dwarf correct, or is it Boffa? Boffa, played by James Nesbitt in all 3 of the Hobbit movies. You see him have this great moment when he gets on top of a troll and he starts controlling this orc troll, and it's great. And again, it's not in the theatrical edition, but it is in the extended edition. And I think it makes all these moments so much more complete, because you see the power of these dwarves. In the first 2 films, you keep getting told about that, and you see a lot. You do see the power of them at the end of the first film, in that sequence when they're fighting off against Azog in the forest on the edge of the mountain. In the second film, you see the power of them when they're facing off against Smaug. But here, in the Battle of the Five Armies, in the extended edition, you really see the power of the dwarves. And I think it was such a missed opportunity to not have that in the theatrical cut. I think it was such a missed opportunity. So yeah, I do really think that the extended edition of this film, of The Hobbit, the Battle of the Five Armies, is far superior than the theatrical cut. And if you say otherwise, I don't believe you've actually seen the extended edition, because it completes the film and it completes the trilogy in a far more conclusive and well-rounded way. Yeah. The extended edition to this film is far superior than the theatrical cut. But anyway, I still love both versions of this film, though. You know, I still love both versions of this film. Although I've never gone back to watch the theatrical cut after seeing the extended edition. I think I saw the theatrical cut twice at the cinema, and that was it. Whilst the extended edition I've seen about, 50 times, maybe more, probably about 100 times actually. But, you know, I really love so many moments in this film, and I really love how you see Bilbo and Thorin's relationship grow throughout all 3 movies. At the start of the first film, Thorin, the leader of the company to go and take back the Lonely Mountain and to defeat Smaug. I love at the start of the first Hobbit movie, you can tell Thorin doesn't think much of Bilbo. Then by the end of the first Hobbit movie, they're hugging as you look out onto the Lonely Mountain in the far distance. They're hugging, and you know, you have this beautiful moment where Thorin says, "I've never been so wrong in my life," talking about how he didn't want Bilbo to save him, and then he says, I've never been so wrong in my life." I'm probably misremembering the scene wrong there, but if you've seen the film, you get the point I'm making. Oh, I'm feeling very tired right now. I've had a very long day. Anyway, yeah, I really love the character development between the development in the relationship between Thorin and Bilbo throughout the first film, and then in the second film, their relationship is still focused on quite a bit, but you also see it start to strain, and you see how the relationship is starting to strain because of all this stuff with Smaug, because of Thorin being obsessed with the Arkenstone, and all this idea of dragon sickness, which Smaug talks about. And dragon sickness is a topic I'll get onto quite shortly in this podcast. Yeah, you see their relationship start to strain, and then in this film, you see them fall out. You see Thorin almost kill Bilbo because of how much the dragon sickness has taken over him. And I really love in the battle sequence where they reunite and everything's just forgotten about because Thorin is out of the Lonely Mountain. The dragon sickness isn't taking over him anymore. He's become level-headed again, and he has his moment with Bilbo, just reunite in battle, and it always warms my heart. And then seeing Bilbo crying over Thorin after Thorin has been killed by Azog the Defiler is always such a heartbreaking moment. I do think it is some of Martin Freeman's best acting. I think Martin Freeman was perfectly cast in all three of these Hobbit movies. I think he was perfectly cast as a young Bilbo Baggins, and that is a scene which really showcases emotional attachment to these movies. Because, I think they were making these films for 3 years. It was 3 years because they shot the first two movies, and I think there was reshoots on the first two films. Then they did a lot of reshoots on the third film as well, and that made them split the third Hobbit movie into, the second and third Hobbit movie into two parts, and you follow my thinking there. And it also delayed the release of the third Hobbit movie. Originally it was meant to come out in summer of 2014, then it got delayed till Christmas 2014 because there was reshoots and delays because of the production of this film, which I will talk about briefly a bit later in the review as well. But I really, you can tell, I think, how much people have invested, how much the people on camera have invested into this project when you watch their performances on screen, because I don't think they would be giving off such good performances and have faith in the project. And I think that's particularly exemplified with Martin Freeman's Bilbo Baggins in this film, where that scene where he cries over Thorin as Thorin is dying, it really shows you, I think, the emotional attachment Bilbo had to these movies, and the emotional attachment he had to playing this character too. So yeah, I really love that scene, and I really love the relationship. I really love how the relationship between Bilbo and Thorin grows throughout all three of these movies. Plus, I love when, Gandalf, early on in the film, I know I'm jumping around here, but whatever. My reviews are always a mess anyway. I love how early on in the film, you see Gandalf is he's dying. He's about to die, and he's being held up in Dol Guldur, and Elrond, Saruman, and Lady Galadriel all come to save him, and they show off their powers. We finally get to see their powers. I know the powers might be discussed in the books, but again, I haven't read the books, so all I know is what I'm seeing in these films. And for me, as someone who'd seen these characters but hadn't seen the full wrath of them in any of the films, I'd say that back about Saruman, actually. Do you see the full wrath of Saruman in the first Lord of the Rings film, The Fellowship of the Ring? But you don't really see the full wrath. You don't really see the full wrath of Lady Galadriel in any Lord of the Rings films or in the Hobbit movies, apart from this one. Same with Elrond, with the exception of the prologue to the Fellowship of the Ring. You don't really see the full wrath of these characters until this moment when they come to save Gandalf from all the, I don't know what they are. I was trying to think of the name of the people that fight. I don't know what I'm going on about anymore. The scene early on when they come to save Gandalf, I love that scene. That's the point I'm making. I love that scene because you see the power of Saruman, you see the power of Lady Galadriel, and you see the power of Elrond. Something I hadn't seen in any other Middle Earth film, and it was something I wanted to see. Something I didn't know I wanted to see in this movie. Honestly, when I went to the cinema to go and see this in 2014, I wasn't expecting to get this moment in the film when you see the power of all three of them as they save Gandalf. But I love how it is included in there. Because it's Peter Jackson giving the fans what they wanted. At least giving me what I wanted and even realise I wanted. Plus, the film isn't just about the battle. There's this misconception online that this film is all about the Battle of the Five Armies. I've heard this misconception online. It's all about the Battle of the Five Armies, hence the name of the film. And that's the complete focus of this movie. The big battle. And yes, the battle in this film, especially if you watch the extended edition, does go on for about an hour. And some people might argue that's too long, and that's a fair argument to make. Personally, I disagree, but I understand why they say that. But that's not just what the film is about. The film isn't just the battle. There's a whole at least 90 minute section of the film before the battle, which is all about the characters and all about their journeys up to this point. You see Bard meet Tauriel, the Elven king who was Legolas's father, played by Lee Pace in these movies. He was also in Desolation of Smaug, who met him in the Woodland Realm in that film. You see Bard meet Tauriel, which I always think brings some very interesting character interactions. You see Legolas and Tauriel go to where the orcs are coming for the battle, and there's all these moments building up to the battle, and all these moments where you see Thorin, being taken over by this dragon sickness, and how the dwarfs are starting to grow tired with him. There's this brilliant scene where the imagery of Thorin on the throne in the Lonely Mountain mirrors the imagery of Thorin's grandfather on the throne of the Lonely Mountain from the prologue from the first Hobbit movie. There's so many brilliant moments like that, which are all vital and make you invest in these characters, so that when the battle does come, you are emotionally engaged in everything going on, because you've been following these characters from the get-go. From the start of this movie, from the previous two films as well, you were following these characters. So when all the big battle sequences come, you invest in what's going on. And the film isn't just about the battle. It's about the characters and the journey they go on, and where they are at this point in the trilogy. If you follow my thinking there, I'm not sure how I'm making sense. It's been such a long day. Anyway, hopefully you understand the point I'm making. That the film isn't just about the battle. It has all these great character moments leading up to the battle, which I do really, really love. And seeing how Bard is this honourable man that people can trust, that people want to follow after he defeated Smaug. It's done so well. I really love all the character stuff in this film, and I really love how it's entwined into the battle sequences too. There's a brilliant moment where Thorin reunites with the Dwarf Lord, played by Billy Connolly, who led the Dwarf armies into the battle. It's just character moments like that which I really, really adore. Yeah, I think all that stuff works brilliantly. And going back onto the opening sequence for a sec, I wanted to mention this when I mentioned the opening sequence earlier on, I just forgot to. I have a theory that Smaug has this sort of curse, this sort of spell he puts on people when he interacts with them, because in the opening of this film, when you see Smaug destroying Lake Town, he starts to talk to Bard, and he even says the classic line from the Lord of the Rings trilogy, probably the most famous line of dialogue, from Lord of the Rings film. He says, "My precious." He says that to Bard in the opening sequence, and Bard's son can see him talking too. I have a theory that people who interact with Smaug, he puts this curse over them, that makes it so it seems like he's actually talking to them. Whilst to anybody else in Middle-earth, Smaug wouldn't be talking, if you follow me. He's only talking to the people who are trying to kill him, or the people who are trying to take something from him. For example, in the second Hobbit movie, Bilbo can understand him because there's a lot of scenes just between Bilbo and Smaug, and same with the dwarfs, because he puts this dragon sickness over him, because he puts this dragon sickness over the dwarfs as they try and kill him in the finale of Desolation of Smaug. And I do think maybe that's the same thing that's going on here, because everybody else in Lake Town doesn't seem to be that blown away by the fact that a dragon can talk. I mean, maybe that's as common in the world of Middle-earth. I don't know. Maybe that's common for dragons to talk and speak to human characters, or, you know, whatever in the world of Middle-earth. Maybe it's common for dragons to speak in this world. Maybe. But if it is, that's something I haven't heard about before. And for me, whenever Smaug is interacting with a character, it's only the character that can understand them. It's not anybody else around them. It's only the characters that can see Smaug and can see the dragon sickness and can see the spell that he's setting on them. You know, if you follow my thinking there, I'm not sure how much it made sense with my theory, and it may not be a theory. It may be something that I've actually discussed about in one of the books. I don't know, but for me, whenever you see Smaug interact with the character, I theorise it's because he's put a spell over them, and that is why I think that is what I think is happening in the opening sequence of this film. Because otherwise, why aren't more people in Lake Town shocked by the fact that this dragon who is burning their homes and burning their lives apart is talking? Why aren't they more shocked by that? You know, I would have thought they would be, especially the dwarfs and Tauriel, which are trying to escape at that moment, because Killy and a bunch of the other dwarfs are still in Lake Town. They didn't go to the Lonely Mountain. So yeah, I think it's this. I think Smaug puts this spell on the characters who interact with him, which make the characters such as Bard and Bard's son at the start of this film, it makes them think they're actually talking to this dragon. This dragon is actually talking. Whilst to anybody else, that would not be the case. Anyway, that was just a little theory I have about this film, and something I wanted to add in there. Also, I want to say that I'm not a big fan of the title of this film. I love the titles to the first two Hobbit movies, and I love the title to Lord of the Rings films too. But at the same time, I think the title to this film makes it sound a little generic. The Battle of the Five Armies. It doesn't really sound that enticing the same way that Desolation of Smaug sounds mysterious, sounds compelling, and I want to watch that film just from the word desolation of the title. I can't think of any other movie that has desolation in its title, you know? And the title for this film, I just think is a bit I don't think it's particularly mysterious or a particularly great title for a Middle-earth film is that. I don't think it's particularly great. I don't think it's a particularly great title for a Middle-earth movie at that. And when I heard the original title of the film was There and Back Again, which makes a lot more sense, and it makes the whole trilogy, it makes the whole series of films, it makes the whole Middle-earth saga come full circle, because at the end of Return of the King, you see that Bilbo is writing the book that Frodo is writing the book that Bilbo wrote in, and Bilbo wrote the story of There and Back Again, and then Frodo wrote the story of The Lord of the Rings. And I think it would have made more sense to have the title of this film be There and Back Again, because it makes the whole Middle-earth saga come full circle, especially if you watch these films in release order. Whilst the Battle of the Five Armies, I've never really liked that title. I think it's a fine title, but I think There and Back Again is so much better and fits the end of this film and the end of this trilogy and the end of the Middle-earth saga overall far better, because also I'm not a big fan of the title as it doesn't really make sense. I'm not sure what the five armies are in the battle of this film. We have the Dwarfs, we have the Elves, we have the Orcs, we have the people of Lake Town. What is the fifth army? Who are the fifth army in this film? Are they the other races of orcs, which you see Legolas and Tauriel almost spying over early on in the film when they go, these orcs are bred for war? Is it that army of orcs? But aren't they the same as the other army of orcs, which we see also marching to Erebor? Are they two different armies? If they are, that's understandable. That makes one of the orc armies the fifth army in the Battle of the Five Armies. But that isn't explained, and I would have liked there to be more explanation, and I would have liked it to be made more clear as to what the fifth army was in the Battle of the Five Armies. Because I can think of four, but what is a fifth army? And yeah, it's another reason I don't really like the title for this movie. But they're only nitpicks, really. The title, I'm not really fond of it. I really love so much about this film, though. Particularly the aesthetic of it. Particularly this sort of wintry and bitter aesthetic to the film, where it's constantly cold and there's this blizzard-like weather going on throughout the battle, and the way that plays into the battle, it makes the film feel so much colder, and I like that, because this isn't the battle from Return of the King. It's not as good as the battle from Return of the King. You know, the battle of Pelennor Fields from Return of the King, the battle for Minas Tirith, it's not as good as that, obviously, but it also isn't that battle. That battle, when it has that sort of sunrise-like lighting, it makes more sense, because we're getting to the end of the trilogy. The evil in this world is going to be defeated. Whilst in the Battle of the Five Armies, even so, the orcs that the dwarves have been facing off against throughout the previous two Hobbit movies are going to be defeated here. It's not the end of evil in this world, because these films are set before the Lord of the Rings movies. So what you have is this bitter and wintry aesthetic, which I think adds so much more to the battle and makes it that much more colder, and at the same time that much more gritty to watch. I really love the aesthetics of the battle sequence, and the aesthetic to the film overall, the look and feel of this film, because it does have this bittersweet feel to it. Yes, it's the end of the trilogy, and yes, the good guys win, the dwarves win, Bard lives, Legolas lives, obviously, because he's in the Lord of the Rings films, but all the good characters live. Well, almost all of them, though, and that's the bittersweet side of it. Thorin doesn't live. Even so, he redeems himself after being taken over by dragon sickness. He doesn't live. Killy doesn't live. One of my favourite dwarfs. Philly doesn't live either. A lot of the dwarfs don't live. Well, I say a lot of the dwarfs don't live, actually. Some of the main characters that we followed over the previous two movies and throughout this film don't live, and I do think that makes it a bittersweet watch. And I think that's added in through the aesthetic, through the look and the feel of the film. Yeah, I really love that about it. And I really love Ian McKellen's performance as Gandalf. There's so many moments where I like to think he's having fun playing this character. You know, there's one moment in particular where he says, where Bilbo says to him, where Thorin and the dwarfs going? As they ride up to the mountain where Azog the Defiler is, and Gandalf says, they're going to cut the head off the snake. And just the way Ian McKellen says it in Gandalf, I love him playing this character. Yeah, he may not have had the best time making these movies, but I think you can tell he still enjoys playing this character, and he gives one phenomenal performance in all three of the Hobbit movies, regardless if he actually had fun making them or not. I think he gives a phenomenal performance in all three of these films. And that scene between him and Bilbo at the end of the battle, where they're just sitting next to each other and Gandalf is trying to light the pipe. Perfect. I love all that. And yeah, I love how we get to see all these characters have their moment in the battle. You know, We get to see Radagast enter the battle with the Eagles. We get to see the shapeshifter who we met at the start of Desolation of Smaug. He enters the battle at one point. I think in the extended cut, he actually has more scenes in the battle where you see the shapeshifter taking down all of these orcs. I think the battle sequences in this movie are so well directed, so well edited, and are so fiercely entertaining to watch. Peter Jackson, in my opinion, did such a tremendous job making this movie, and making all 6 Middle-earth movies at that. I know people don't love the Hobbit trilogy, and I completely understand why. For me, it'll always hold a special place in my heart because it's nostalgic. It takes me back to those memories of, watching these films for the first time as a kid. But I completely understand why people don't like these movies. But I love all 6 of I love all 6 movies in the Middle-earth saga because there's a sense of authorship. There's a sense of love and passion being put into these films, because when you watch special features on any of the Hobbit movies and on any of the Lord of the Rings films, you see the amount of work, blood, sweat and tears that went into making these films. And the fact that Peter Jackson directed all 6 movies still blows me away. There's no other filmmaker that has done that, because George Lucas didn't direct all of the first 6 Star Wars movies. He didn't direct Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. I think James Cameron will eventually direct 6 Avatar films, but he hasn't yet. And, who's to say whether he'll be alive to make the 6th Avatar movie? And the Avatar films don't have the same effect as these movies anyway. And the fact that Peter Jackson made 6 of these movies and did a bloody good job at doing so, in my opinion, just shows you how incredible he is as a director. Yes, he may have winged it. I've seen the behind-the-scenes footage where he says, I winged it on the Hobbit movies, I was never on top of things, and that is sad to see, because, Peter Jackson, when he's making Lord of the Rings films, seems like the happiest man on earth, whilst when he's making the Hobbit movies, he still seems like he's having fun. But the fact that he said he also winged it making his movies is also sad, So, I know Peter Jackson said that he's winged it, but even if he did wing it, he did a pretty phenomenal job of winging it, because I don't know any other director who could helm battle sequences like he does, who could make a talking dragon voiced by Benedict Cumberbatch feel so menacing and have such a presence, and make each one of the dwarfs so likeable in that first Hobbit movie, and make for such an enjoyable and engrossing and immersive journey throughout all 3 of these films. I don't know another director that could have done that the same way he did. Sure, Guillermo del Toro is meant to direct the Hobbit movies, but I don't know if he would have done as good a job. I genuinely don't know that. And I think that Peter Jackson's directing in the battle sequences, in the Battle of the Five Armies, are truly something else. And I think there's a reason we haven't had any other good medieval fantasy war movies since this one. At least as far as I can think of. I know we had Game of Thrones, and it had many great battle sequences after this film came out. Sure, the Battle of the Bastards, the Battle for the Wall. There's many great medieval fantasy battles in Game of Thrones. Sure. But I don't know anybody else who's done it in cinema the same way Peter Jackson has. And the way he directs battle sequences, I mean, I could write an essay about it, because the directing is so on point, and you can tell he is having fun directing these sequences too. Yeah, the battle goes on for about an hour, and some may argue that's like 15-20 minutes too long. And yes, there's a lot of CGI in the battle sequences, but the fact still remains for me that whenever I watch the battle sequences in the Battle of the Five Armies, I feel like a kid again, and I'm still blown away by Peter Jackson's directing. He delivers on the battle sequence in this film. He delivers on the title in this film in the way you want him to. I just wish he told us who the Five Armies were, so that I could get more, so then I could love the battle even more, you know? Because even now when I'm watching, I'm going, 1, 2, 3, 4. Who is the fifth army in this battle? Please just tell me. Maybe he does, maybe I'm just not remembering it. But still, you know, I loved all the battle sequence, and I have heard some people say, is it spectacle over substance, you know? And maybe it is. Maybe it is spectacle over substance. But there is still substance going on in the battle sequence of this film. I've already spoken about at length. There is still substance going on. There's all these character moments. And the way Peter Jackson keeps cutting to that, it's something he does in all of the battle sequences in any Lord of the Rings movie so well. In any Middle-earth film, should I say. You know, and I don't think the battle in this film is as good as the battle for Helm's Deep in The Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers, or the battle for Minas Tirith in The Lord of the Rings: Return of the King, or even the battle of the Black Gate in Return of the King. But I think it's a very good battle. And I think it does a very good job at paying off everything that was set up in the previous two movies. But that's just me. Also, I really love the opening sequence with Smaug. I really love that. And of course, I've got to talk about the Howard Shore musical score. I really love in the musical score how it feels like Howard Shore is giving it one last push. You know? Kind of like I'm doing this review today, because I'm not with it. It feels like Howard Shore is giving one last push with the musical score for this movie, because there's all these new themes in there, which I really love, and all these variations of themes that we've heard before. Like there's this more heroic sounding version of the theme to Lake Town, you know, that was my terrible rendition of the Lake Town theme from the Hobbit movies. There's a more heroic version of that at one point, and there's so many themes in this film. I'm thinking, God, you know, Howard Shore didn't need to do that. He didn't need to go the extra mile for the music in this film, but he did. And Howard Shore's musical scores for all 6 of the Middle-earth movies that Peter Jackson directed are a gift from God. I mean, I'm not a religious person at all, but they're really... there's something special. There's not a day go by where I don't listen to some music from the Middle-earth, from any of the Middle-earth movies that he did the music for. Whether it's the Hobbit movies or the Lord of the Rings films. There's not a day go by when I don't listen to a Howard Shore piece of music from a Lord of the Rings film or a Hobbit movie. Not a day goes by, and that's because they are so memorable, and that's because of the effect that they have on you when you listen to them outside of the film. They still just capture the feeling of these movies perfectly, and I think his music for this film perfectly captures the aesthetic and the overall feel of the Battle of the Five Armies, and I think his music for all of these movies, not a thing I would change about them. I really love Howard Shore's scores for these films. Plus, if we're sticking on with music for a sec, I love how in the end credits of this film, I almost forgot what I was going to say then, in the end credits of this film, we hear Pippin himself, Billy Boyd, singing The Last Goodbye in end credits that mirror the end credits to The Return of the King. The end credits to The Return of the King are in that sort of sketch-like format where you see, I don't know, Elijah Wood's name, you see this sketch drawing of Frodo Baggins. And in this film, when you see Martin Freeman's name, you see the sketch drawing of Bilbo Baggins. Same with Ian McKellen and so on and so on and so on. It mirrors the end credits to The Return of the King. And whenever I hear Billy Boyd singing The Last Goodbye, I know it's the end of Peter Jackson's Middle-earth journey. I wish it could go on forever. I wish Peter Jackson made so much more of these movies, because I love spending time in the world he creates, and I think he directs the hell out of these films. You know, the money's on the screen in the way you want from a big budget movie like this. But whenever I hear that, you know, The Last Goodbye, it just makes me feel sad, because I'm like, yeah, it is The Last Goodbye. We're never going to see Peter Jackson make another Middle-earth movie. And it makes me sad, that, because you know, like I said before, I love his direction for these films, and the way it plays over the end credits, and then how the end credits and the drawing in the end credits ends with this sketch drawing with this drawing of Hobbiton, of Bilbo's home. It's just, I love it. I don't know how much I'm making sense, but I love that in the end credits of this film. And as I was saying that, I just thought of a nitpick I had with this movie. My only other nitpick, other than the name and other than some of the overuse of CGI, is what the hell happened to Tauriel, the she-elf which Legolas seems to have a bit of a thing for, who has this almost like Romeo and Juliet romance with Killy, who's one of the dwarfs, part of Thorin's company. What the hell happens to Tauriel? Because she's not in the Lord of the Rings films, whereas Legolas is. But she doesn't die in this film. Her final scene is a dud scene where she's seen crying over Killy's body. And she's like, I want to bury him. One of the worst lines in all of these movies. I think these movies are very well written, you know. But I think that line is just plain bad. And I'm sat there at the end of this film thinking, where did Tauriel go? That's my biggest thing. Like, is it explained in the books? Obviously not, because she's not in the books, from what I've heard. So, where did she go? It's not explained that, and this is going to sound like I'm criticising the character and that I hate the character. I don't. But I would have preferred her to die, because then the character would have had more of a conclusive ending, and it may have even made me like that character more. Because when Thorin dies, I have this sense of I don't know what the word I'm trying to think of right now. I have this sense of love for the character that I don't know if I would have had if he didn't die. But when Tauriel dies, but she doesn't die, that's the point actually, that's the point I'm making. Because Tauriel doesn't die, I don't really care about the character, and I always forget about it because it feels like the filmmakers want us to forget about it because she's in the Lord of the Rings films and we don't see where she goes. Her last scene, she's trying over Philly. I get the point of the scene doesn't really work for me, but I get the point of the scene, and it's like, but then where does she go? Where does she go? And that's another criticism I had with this movie. All I needed is one line from Tauriel, Legolas' father. All you needed is that. But you don't even get that. And I do think that was another misstep. Again, one of the reasons that this is my least favourite of the middle of Peter Jackson's Middle Earth saga. One of my reasons is my least favourite movie of all 6 movies he directed. That being said, though, I really love the end of the film when you see Bilbo return to the Shire, and his house is being raided, it's being sold off, and he goes back into his home though, and he picks up the handkerchief that he made a whole big fuss about when he started the quest with the dwarfs in the first Hobbit movie, and he looks at it, and then he looks at the One Ring. He looks at the One Ring like this, and he gives it this like Gollum-like facial expression, and it foreshadows what's going to happen in Lord of the Rings film. And you even hear the Lord of the Rings theme, boom, you hear that starts to come in, and then you get a cameo from Ian Holm as old Bilbo Baggins to tie into the start of Fellowship of the Ring, as you hear Gandalf's voice outside. What about a very old friend? And it ties into the Fellowship of the Ring perfectly as the camera focuses in on the map that the dwarves the dwarves had for their quest to take back Erebor, the Lonely Mountain. It focuses on that, and you see the titles come up, directed by Peter Jackson. It's a perfect ending that comes full circle, and I really love the end to this film. Apparently there was a delete scene that is not featured on the extended edition or theatrical cut to this movie, where Bilbo goes home and he plants this acorn in memory of Thorin. And you see him talk about this acorn early on in this film when he's talking to Thorin about how he picked it up in Mirkwood or something. He says he picked it up early on their quest. and he wanted to keep it as a souvenir to remember what happened. And there was a deleted scene which apparently was filmed. I looked up online, that's what it said, it was filmed, but it wasn't included. I would have liked that to be included, so that you knew Bilbo often remembered Thorin. I mean, you can assume that anyway, but just adding that scene in would have been like the cherry on the ice on top of the cake, you know? It's like that scene where you see Sam marry the girl whose dreams at the end of Return of the King. You didn't need to see that, but it added something, and it would have just been something like that, where seeing Bilbo plant the acorn in memory of Thorin adds just that little more to this movie, but they didn't include it, and I do think that was a missed opportunity, especially not to include it on the extended edition, because they had the opportunity there, and I think it would have been just that nice, sweet addition that wasn't necessarily needed, I know, but would have added something, you know. But still, I love the ending to the film. I love the ending to this film, and I love this film overall. I don't care what anybody says. I think this is a fitting end to the Middle-earth saga, and I love all these movies, and I really, really, really love how they focus on hobbits, and hobbits making the biggest differences. The littlest characters making the biggest differences, and they're inspiring. They're inspiring for so many reasons. They're inspiring because of that, because I often think of myself as a hobbit, and whenever I watch these films, I feel like I want to go out there and, you know, do something like the hobbits do in this film. I want to change the world like they do, and also because Peter Jackson directed all 6 movies, and if somebody can do that, if somebody can helm all 6 of these epic, and I mean epic with a capital E there, then, well, if he can do that, you can do anything, you know. It's a power of a great director, and it's a power of what one man surrounded by the right crew can do with a series of movies where, yes, they're all big budget, but the budget is on the screen in the way they should be. In the way, you know, in the way budgets should be with big budget movies, if you follow my thinking there. Yeah, I find these movies inspirational for so many reasons, and I really adore them. I know I've said that quite a few times now, but I really do mean that, because they hold such a special place in my heart, and that is why I have, give me a sec here, 3 one-ring props from the Lord of the Rings films. Well, actually, I only have 2, as this one isn't mine. This Lord of the Rings prop, the smallest one, which actually has a necklace bit broken off it, this one I had in my review of Fellowship of the Ring, and it's because at the time I couldn't find another one-ring prop to wear, but this didn't fit around my big head and my fat neck, so I just had to hold it up, and it's in the thumbnail of my review of Fellowship of the Ring, but at the same time now, I didn't wear it in that podcast. But this one-ring prop I wore in my review of The Two Towers, Return of the King, and the first Hobbit movie, An Unexpected Journey, but it's not mine, it's my brother's. I got it him for Christmas, and when I went to go and get one for myself after Christmas in early January, as nobody got me one for Christmas, which I was slightly annoyed about, but when I went to go and get this one for myself in early January, it was no longer available. So you may be wondering what I am wearing on my neck then, and that is a one-ring prop that is very similar to this, and my computer's about to shut down because it's almost out of juice. Oh well, that is a one-ring prop which is pretty much the same as this one, but I didn't get from the same place. I got it off eBay, and that's what I'm wearing. I wore it in my review of Desolation of Smaug, and I'm wearing it again in this podcast because, well, I love these movies. I love all the Lord of the Rings films and all the Hobbit movies. I think Peter Jackson is a master of the craft, and I think that's particularly the case. I think that's showcased throughout all of these films, because he had a vision for all 6 movies, and you watch behind the scenes features and you see the blood, sweat and tears that gone into making these films, and it's unlike any other production I have ever seen. We won't get another series of films like this. We won't get another saga of films like this. Because there's a sense of warmth and there's a sense of home that comes with any of these movies. And that is something I don't get with many other films. Maybe the Star Wars franchise, or certain Star Wars movies at that, and maybe the first 3 Indiana Jones films. But other than that, for me, the same feeling doesn't come with any other set of films. And the Battle of the Five Armies, yeah, I absolutely love it as a great conclusion and as a very fitting end to Peter Jackson's Middle-earth journey. And so, all in all, I'm going to say that The Hobbit, the Battle of the Five Armies, bear with me, is a 10 out of 10. Had to get Bilbo's sword out for the final rating of my final Middle-earth film review. God, yeah, I love these films. Hence why I'm holding up the sword. You know, just as a sword that Bilbo has in all 3 of these films, and I think Frodo has it in the Lord of the Rings trilogy too. So yeah, had to get this up for the rating to show my love of these movies. And one last thing I had to get up for this review to make it full circle, to make it all come full circle, just... oh god, it's falling apart. Bear with me. To make it all come full circle, just like the door of a Hobbit home, it is my Lego Hobbit home. I didn't build it myself, obviously. I got it when the set came out like 10 years ago now, but makes everything come full circle, you know, just to show you my love of these movies and to show you how much these films mean to me. This is a Lego set I've been preserving. Is preserving the right word? I don't know. I've been going on for so long now. Words have sort of become meaningless to me. I've been preserving because of my love of all 6 films. So yes, I love this movie for so many reasons, as I've already said and as I've already been rammed on about, and I love all 6 of Peter Jackson's Middle-earth movies. So, with that being said, I'm going to round off this podcast finally and say once more that The Hobbit, the Battle of the Five Armies is a 10 out of 10 from me. Anyway guys, that's it for today's podcast. If you have seen The Hobbit, the Battle of the Five Armies, please let me know your thoughts on it in the comment section below. And please let me know your thoughts on any of these Middle-earth movies in the comment section below. And what you thought of my reviews. Maybe you thought they could have been done better, or maybe you enjoyed them for some reason. Whatever your thoughts are on any of my Middle-earth film reviews and the Hobbit movies, and in particular The Hobbit, the Battle of the Five Armies, please let me know in the comment section below. And as always, thank you for watching or listening to this podcast, and if you haven't yet, please do click down below and like and subscribe on this podcast, particularly if you enjoy the podcast. And I suppose it's it. Yes, somehow we got to the end of this podcast, so I will see you guys again soon, but bye for now. Bye.